Hi there, and welcome to Pearced Off, another counter-apologetics and philosophy segment from Jonathan M.S. Pearce for the Skepticule Podcast. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about what I talked about in the last segment, because I'm going to answer some of Paul Thompson's criticisms against the points I made with regards to causality. Now, in the last segment I said that I asked the question, have I killed anybody? Talked about going on a school trip as a teacher, taking a class there, doing a quick walk there, quick walk back, and it turned out that night one of the parent helpers that helped on the school trip had a heart attack and died. And I said, am I responsible, even morally responsible a little bit for that person dying? I talked about causality and said essentially that you can't cut up causality and time and events, in fact, and label them with these kind of abstract labels and then say that this event caused this event, which caused this event. That causality is in fact one massive matrix that just can't be quantized, can't be cut up discretely into units. That's it's obviously a little bit more complicated than that, but essentially that was it. Now, Paul Thompson said in reply that, well, of course, someone that puts a shotgun to someone else and shoots them, it's primarily the cause of the death of that person, and that the fact that I think what Paul was getting at was this person, let's call him Jim, kills Harry with a shotgun. Now, Jim has a shotgun, shoots Harry, and Harry dies. He's in greater proximity in sort of time and space to Harry and Harry's death, and so that seems to be that Jim has kind of a major, really important causal importance in the death of Harry. Paul, I think, talked more about there being a continuum of causality. So in this case, Jim would sit really far up near the sort of 100% mark of causality, or however you want to look at it. I think this is pretty problematic for a lot of reasons. I think what Paul's doing is taking a piece of jigsaw and just taking it out of the jigsaw and just looking at it independently. Of course, that piece of jigsaw makes no sense on its own. You have to have the rest of the jigsaw around it to understand the full picture. And I think causality is just like that. You just simply don't have pieces of causality on their own as standalone units. But one of the main problems I had with that is what Paul does here is he arbitrarily takes a piece of causality a certain amount of time away from the event. Now, if we accept that the event of Harry dying, what actually caused Harry's death? Well, let's assume that actually what caused his death, if we're talking about proximity to the death, so the closest thing to the actual death of Harry that caused Harry to die would be the lack of oxygen to the brain, or a depleted brain in some way as the shotgun pellets enter the brain. So in fact, what killed Harry, more accurately, if you're talking about proximity, is the shotgun pellets, or the lack of blood, oxygen. In the same way, some philosophers might point out that how did the window break when the boy threw a baseball at the window? What caused the window to break? The boy throwing the ball. Well, this is completely analogous to Paul saying Jim killed Harry with a shotgun. You could say that the boy broke the window with the baseball. But of course, what actually broke the window was maybe the first few atoms of the baseball encountering those atoms of the window. In order to say the boy did it, or in order to say that Jim killed Harry, you have to then take time back, but not keep going. So for some reason you stop at Jim. And then you say, well, what was it? Jim's pulling of the trigger? Was it the brain states he had? Was it the proteins in the cells of his neurons or brain cells or what have you? What caused Harry's death? And in order to say that Jim caused Harry's death, you actually have to go back an arbitrary amount of time into the past, but stop. You're stopping arbitrarily, and you're not allowing it to go forward up to an arbitrary amount. So it's like this unit of time, which was Jim deciding to pull the trigger, or actually Jim pulling the trigger. I mean, it's very difficult. Is it the deciding to pull the trigger? Is it the pulling of the trigger? Is it after that? Is it before that? But then you're into this whole problem. The fact that even Jim deciding to do that, and I've just established that that's an arbitrary amount of time backwards from the cause of this person's death, from Harry's death. It just doesn't make sense on its own. So you have things just leading up to his brain states that led to his intentions. That his intention would have been different, for example, if he had different brain states. And you can say, actually, what caused it? You can actually talk about omissions, so things that didn't happen, you say could cause it. So, Jim, shot the shotgun, but just before that, his wife was deciding to call Jim on his mobile phone, but actually said, don't worry, Harry's a nice guy, don't get annoyed with him. But actually, she decided to at the last minute not to do that. So maybe she's at fault. And of course, you've just got this massive, complex matrix of causality. And I think that Paul's claim that it's the most proximal thing to the victim is really problematic. So really, I wanted to see what Paul had to say to that. I mean, there's lots of other things I could say, and I could talk about time being relative and not being able to cut it up into discrete units. Go on a lot more about that. Talk about how events and people and things, entities, don't have clearly defined boundaries, and so therefore when we say, well, this caused that, that's a really, really big problem. But I'd just like to see what he has to say on account of arbitrarily cutting off particular units of causality and saying that caused, or that primarily caused something to happen. So a little bit to think about. I've been Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Check out my blog, and as ever, question everything.